So next up, we're going to have Linda Murphy and Sandra Dean come up, and they're going to talk about the 30 by 30. We've had a lot of meetings around the state that they've put on, and we've been grateful for them for bringing the attention of the 30-30 land grab that the Biden administration is pushing so hard. So let's go ahead and give them a round of applause. Thank you. And they've passed out some papers that everybody can follow along. So.
Thank you. Well, we're glad to be here today. It's been a long road for OISA to get to this point of a statewide work that is actually making a lot of progress. It takes a long time to plow a field that hasn't been broken, right? You know all about that. You've got a lot of rocks in the way, a lot of clods, trees, other things can be in the way, and that is not real different than trying to get an issue understood out across the state or across the nation, regardless of the state and nation. Oklahoma's a conservative state, but as we've had other people say, and we all know already, we've had officials saying today how hard it is to get things done, even with the Republican Party, which is supposed to be about freedom and conservation of rights, instead of going along with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And even though we've got some action going in our state against the Environmental Social Governance Score, ESG, which is a great thing, we are not going to invest state dollars in corporations that use ESGs. Why? The E is environmental, which is the same as the Sustainable Development Goals out of the United Nations. The S is the social. Can we guess what all that is? Diversity, equity, inclusion, critical race theory, the rights for a child to choose their gender, to change their name, and even physically change their body. So the state of Oklahoma has taken action on some of these things, and when people understand that 30 by 30 is a part of that radical agenda, which has already been recognized in certain areas, then they begin to get a little more light coming on in their thinking. So it takes a lot of effort. I met Andrea Hutchison 10 years ago at the state capitol. Some of you know me from education. I ran for office, state superintendent of schools back in the early 90s when the Clintons were in D.C. They'd been in Arkansas where they had already wrecked a lot of things. Thank God for Sarah Huckabee, who is taking things in the right direction, even better than her daddy did. But we know she learned a lot from her daddy, so don't want to discount him too much. But Sarah Huckabee, standing up with other state officials to stop the Chinese purchase of land in their state and other foreign investors, but a lot of the Chinese, of course. So we've been friends, Andrea and I, for 10 years. About 2013, I met her at the state capitol when I was speaking on education. And in my speech, I was fighting to stop Common Core. It was already in state law. Common Core state standards were in law. We actually overturned that law and repealed it from law. It's not easy to undo something once they get it in law. But I'll tell you something else I've learned over these years. And then before that, it was outcomes-based education under the Clinton administration. That's a whole nother thing, but it all is the same thing, repackaged, revamped, renamed, a few chairs on the deck rearranged, but you're getting the same centralized control top-down. So I've made a chart, and I just have one copy of this. I should have probably brought an overhead, but I'm just going to hold it up so you'll have just a general far distant glance. These are major organizations and processes of central control. And I've named the same suspects that we've already heard from Shad, World Wildlife Fund, the United Nations, World Economic Forum, We've got the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which we heard probably Senator Hamilton and definitely J.J. Humphrey, my friend from the Eastern Oklahoma state representative. That's what we deal with even at the state capitol. We have the Chamber of Commerce wanting money. Money, money, money. They give money and they want money. We all do want good economic development. But when we sell our very soul and our private property rights and our freedoms to have economic development because we bring in global corporations that are all pushing the climate control agenda, then we have defeated the whole purpose. So when I met Andrea, she was in the audience when I spoke at the state capitol there on Common Core, 2013. I walked through the crowd, and as I was leaving, she said, "Do you know what this is?" And she had one of her infamous charts with her and said, do you know what this is? I looked at it. I said, "That's Agenda 21. She said, "Yes, you know what it is." So immediately we connected. And over the years, I've met Mindy Patterson and Shad Sullivan through Andrea and a lot of other wonderful people. Bert Hudson, met him at Chain Ranch as well. Excuse me. And about 3 years ago, I moved out to Elk City. I'm from Roger Mills County. I was born in Cheyenne. My great-grandparents came there in the early 1900s. My mother was a sixth-generation Texan, and we've got some Battle of San Jacinto and, come and take it blood in our veins. And a lot of people in Oklahoma, whether they're Oklahomans from somewhere else, but we are independent people. And we do not like when we know our rights are being infringed. So I'm from Roger Mills County. When I moved out there 3 years ago, I met Sandy. I had known her husband, Gary, danced at some of his Western dances many times over the years because he had a great country and Western band, still plays wonderful music, Gary Dean. And Sandy had started the Western Oklahoma Patriots organization. Well, I loved that. Here we had an independent citizen saying, let's get some education out here to Western Oklahoma with issues that people need to know about and be concerned about. So she and I connected, and I did an education meeting. That's a whole nother story for another hour, but not now. But when this 30 by 30 land grab started really unfolding in the Biden administration, it became, I tell people, I said, when the house is halfway burned down, it's on fire, and you're telling them, hey, there's a fire in the grass, it's getting ready to hit your house. They don't want to believe that, but it's halfway burned down, they're ready to get the water hose out. So with Biden, we've got him now spending trillions of dollars that we don't have to do things we don't want, to implement what Clinton, with the biodiversity that you put up earlier, Shad. So much of what Shad put up is exactly what we're seeing in the 30 by 30 plan. So we're going to talk about some specific ways that this is getting done. And when a year ago, this month actually, in November last year, Andrea contacted me and said, could you be on a Zoom call with myself, Mindy Patterson, and Angel Cushing out of Kansas? And we want to hear what Angel says about national heritage areas. Well, you may know that story. A national heritage area in Kansas, and Shad brought that up also for Colorado, where there is one. Or did you still have it? You don't. You got it stopped? Good. Good to hear that. Nebraska and Missouri, there was one already where Angel Cushing lived. So she kind of woke up politically, I guess you would say, finding out that she couldn't build a fence on her own land. Well, that's pretty shocking. She's, well, I own this land. We paid for it, my husband and I. We've got the deed. It's our land. And she called a friend of mine, actually, who's the state representative up there at the time, Tatum, and said, what's going on with this? They're telling me I can't build a fence. And Tatum told her, I think you're in the National Heritage Area. And she said, no, this is our land. We own this land. I mean, you wouldn't think so. But she checked and found out, yes, it was National Heritage Area. So literally, this is one way the government can control your use of land, even though they're not physically buying the land or using eminent domain, because a lot of people think about that right up front. It's eminent domain. No, that can happen in certain situations. It's happened, but there are programs out there now that are getting utilized. So I started looking at what we do in Oklahoma, and we do not have a National Heritage Area in Oklahoma. Now, that issue set a fire in Kansas in the grassroots public once that understanding was out there. But that wasn't going to happen here because we don't have one. Do I think they might do one next year, tomorrow, next week? That is very possible. We have heritage everywhere, don't we? So if you'll go to the handout that says New Expansion, that is about some of the ways that we know and some further study for you to understand better all the different ways 30 by 30 is working. 30 by 30, National Heritage Area is on there right at the top, the first two items, and then I'm going to talk about the rest of it. President Biden, when he went into office, now I didn't say when he was elected, but when he went into that office in January of 2021, he signed an executive order ordering, among many other things, and there's so much in that executive order, we could have a week conference on each part of it, okay? But we're going to talk about 30 by 30. 30 by 30 is in the executive order he signed in January of 2021. And that says that he will take, that the U.S. federal government will take 30% of American land out of use, out of human use, by 2030. So that's oil and gas, that's beef production, that's recreation, that's any way that you're utilizing land. It needs to be preserved, they say. And as Margaret Byfield, and we point to Margaret Byfield as the expert, because she is the expert with American Stewards of Liberty, which she founded after many years of experience growing up with a family that lost land with this kind of federal government overreach control. Margaret says that the research this is based on, which is not real science as we know, but the research comes from the Center for American Progress. Well, that's John Podesta. And if any of you followed the Clinton administration and his workings over the years, with Obama even, he was in the administration there. He's just a real radical. And the Center for American Progress says that only 12% of the land now in the United States is conserved. See, they're taking that word and saying that's conserved. Another thing that's part of this is conserved best, has the best ecosystem in the plains with bison. With bison, they say. Because bison bring in the right kinds of plant life, the right kinds of things in the soil because of the way nature works with their, life cycle. How does that work? I had a post about the bison, which is part of the Biden directives, money being spent to restore bison in many areas of the United States now as part of the ecosystem. They call this rewilding also. Rewilding, where you go back to nature with the same kind of plant life, insect life, animal life, but not humans. And so I posted about bison in one of Biden's initiatives. There are many. I'm going to talk about some specifics in a minute, but just giving you the general picture here. I posted about that on Facebook. I've got a Facebook page, and Sandy's got one, and you can get a lot of info in those places. But a man looked at that and reposted it, and he said, okay, So cow gas bad, bison gas good. How does that work? Okay, there is a video. There is a video that I think tells a lot of the story just watching the video. The National Park Service, man from the National Park Service, along with a man from the Sioux tribe, Redbud Sioux tribe, Economic Development Corporation, and a man from the World Wildlife Fund, sitting in a group in a Zoom meeting, and this is promoted and put out on YouTube by University of Wyoming, University of Montana, some people in academics. So we've got the federal government with a tribe with the World Wildlife Fund, and you heard Shad again talk about World Wildlife Fund. They're one of the radical groups, and they've been around since the early 60s in Europe. So this is, again, these people have had a lot of time with a lot of practice. And they've just gotten more and more money, and now they're using our money that we don't even have to do this stuff and to do it now. So this discussion is about restoring bison. It's called Cooperative Eco-Cultural Restoration of American Bison. Okay, so cultural, well, what does that have to do with it? When you watch the video, you can find it on YouTube, and I'll put it back on my Facebook page again. You can all find it there. The man from the Sioux tribe says that the bison are their brothers. They're their relatives. That's all about their beliefs of how the world was created, how they were sustained. I mean, it's a religious belief system being funded and agreed upon by the National Park Service. Okay, who is the National Park Service? Let's look at that. If you go back to this handout, new expansion, we'll talk about who's over that National Park Service in just a minute, but let's look at this next. There are 3 paragraphs. The 3 at the top, the first 2 are about National Heritage Area, and it's important to understand that. But again, we don't have one right now. So Sandy and I have honed our message to the public, and you all are way beyond where the public is. So this would be confusing if I spoke this way to the public, like I'm saying it to you. But you know, and you just heard some good speakers explain a lot of things that plug in here. But we go through this. Okay, the third one is White House Declaration of North America, DNA. That is a document, a declaration, agreement that President Biden signed in January of this year. After we had the Zoom call about 30 by 30 and what to do in Oklahoma, Biden signed this a couple of months later. It's like, wow, this is happening now. And you know how the Lord quickens you if we will listen. If we're his child and we're listening, there is a Holy Spirit quickening about what to do. And I'm like, wow, this is just timely. We've got to get on this. President Biden signed this Declaration of North America. It's called North America because he signed it with the President of Canada and the President of Mexico. And in that agreement, they declare really all these same things over again, but it includes even more. Diversity, equity, inclusion is in it. 30 by 30 is in it. You can go to the White House website, download that, read it, and you won't have to have me convincing you of anything. You can read it. He wants the indigenous people to have a lead role, and you're going to see that when you go into the federal sites that are involved in doing 30 by 30 through all of these different initiatives that are out there now. Okay, there is no way we can teach you about all of the things, even a list of them. We could stand here for an hour to read a list of the money and the initiatives he's rolled out and not even talk about what they are. So we're going to focus on some things, and you do further research. Hopefully you will do that and your friends and family. Okay, so that DNA, Declaration of North America, on the White House website. So is this global? Yeah. This is international, this is global. And we see proof of it over and over again. But 30 by 30 is also restated in that declaration. 30% of the land out of human use by 2030. Well, when we first think about this, a lot of people have said, well, we've already got, all these national parks and all these, federal national grassland and wildlife refuges. Yeah, we do. But guess what? Those are being used by humans in a lot of cases. We've had people grazing on federal lands, not people, but their cattle, hopefully. People have cattle on these, grazing on these lands. We've had oil and gas drilling in the past on some of these lands. But what is happening, and again, Margaret Byfield and American Stewards of Liberty have many articles, many videos that explain this. It doesn't end how they can close down national monument areas where it's not being utilized by people. I don't know if you've heard about the bison running free in Yellowstone Park and the foolish tourists who try to get in front of them and take pictures. And, we see those articles. Once you start getting those on my feed, it just keeps coming. I'm like, okay, here's another one, I said, well, maybe that's natural selection or, a natural extinction. No, I'm just kidding. If folks don't have a better understanding than that, maybe they have come to the end there. But we see this happening, and we had a meeting in Elk City in February. We had two. We had those back to back. And Mindy, thank you again. She came and presented at that meeting and broke down the federal law on 30 by 30, and people were really, beginning to understand this is a real thing. And then we knew, once we started looking at, we don't have a national heritage area, I said, we've got to look at the private property that the federal government has in legislation with these cattle trails. Because Andrea, once again, our alarm in Oklahoma that sounded the alarm on all of this, had told me 10 years ago, Linda, those two cattle trails go through our family's private property. And they'll be part of the federal government. I'm like, that was hard to comprehend. But once 30 by 30 rolled out, I'm thinking that again, and Andrea and I are talking, and so I get the research out and look back and find Tom Cole in Oklahoma wrote the first bill in 2005. It was redone for several years. Then there's been like a 10-year period of time. There was a feasibility study done. Then the last year, there was another bill filed, and it's putting the Great Western Trail, which is in far western Oklahoma. It goes from the tip of Texas through Oklahoma, through Texas, through Oklahoma, through Kansas to Ogallala, Nebraska. That's a long-reaching strip of land. And then the Chisholm Trail from the tip of Texas through Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas to Abilene, Kansas. It stops at Abilene, Kansas. So I thought, and Sandy and I agreed, this is what people need to understand, because this is federal legislation that's already filed and it's in a committee. So we can talk about watching out for national heritage areas, which we need to do. We're going to talk about that, but we need to focus on stopping that bill, and finding out that our congressman had actually written the original bill. He wasn't on the one for this last year, and that bill still is alive. It's on pause because of public response to what we've been able to do to get the meetings out there. We had 100 people in Duncan. Dennis Sweat set that meeting up at the Chisholm Trail Heritage Center, which was wonderful. And a lot of people there had land right on the trail. We've had meetings in Elgin, in Newcastle, Elk City, Enid. We've had several meetings. I haven't even counted how many. And now we have 17 counties that have resolutions signed that have been returned to us to say they oppose 30 by 30. And that is the county commissioners have signed those resolutions. We use the template that American Stewards of Liberty produced, and they've got a template guidebook There are different ways they can do it, and of course they can write a resolution any way they want to, but it helps them get started. And so we have urged the citizens, the grassroots people of the community, of the county, to go to their county commissioners and talk to them and inform them. And some of them have come to meetings. We've had quite a bit of response in our meetings with county commissioners attending. A sheriff came to one, and he even wrote a letter himself, and the Roger Mills County Sheriff signed the resolution as well. So, you know, county government has authority, but we've got to have state authority too. So let's just talk about, back on the trail bill, I kind of went from the federal back to the state, but let's look at the back side of this handout that I just gave you, or that Mindy passed out for you. New expansion. On the back side, you'll see a map down at the bottom. And that's the trails. That's a picture of the trails. It shows you the length of them. The bill now is in a committee where it's on pause because Frank Lucas, first of all, decided, with all of the public pushback that we were getting through our meetings talking about that legislation, that he really did not want to support the bill this time. So he wrote a letter, made a press statement, and a nice article came out of, I think it was the Energy magazine, but anyway, it was out there, and that helped tremendously. And then we find it's really in the hands of 3 Kansas congressmen, LaTurner, Estes, and Davids. Okay, Davids is the second Native American woman elected to Congress. She is sitting in a sweet spot with the Biden administration as a Democrat, pushing the same agenda, no doubt. So she's on there as an author. It's going to be hard to get that killed, but Kansas is learning more about it. We were in Texas at the American Stewards of Liberty Conference Summit a couple of weeks ago with Margaret Byfield and all the people that spoke there. And Sandy presented there for us and did a great job. She really did a great job on it. We had a lot of people come back, and we've been able to connect with them in other states as well. But this federal bill, just like everything that we try to do, there are people that don't want to believe it. And there was a woman right there, one of the people at the summit, who turned around just before Sandy went up and said, "Oh, well, I know Congressman Estes, you're wrong about that. He's not for it. He's the author of it, okay? He's the author of it, and it's still alive, and it's in the committee." And he wrote a letter where he said he wanted to pause it. Does that sound like kill it? No. If you pause the car, you don't crash it. You wait, wait till a better time. That's just part of the game. Incrementalism, yes, incrementalism. Little by little, and they will outweigh us on a lot of things and, come back and redo it and rename it and make it better funded, etc. Okay, so that piece of legislation has got a lot of heat on it, but we want more and more people to understand. So you've got a flyer on that. You've got a handout about legislative, let's see what to say, land grab legislation action sheet. That's HR 247 at the top. And I'm not going to read all that. You can read it. I've just talked about some of it. You can contact your congressman and say you want that killed, because what it does, it puts those trails that go through private property, and they go through public property, they cross highways, they do a lot of things, but when it goes through private property, that property is endangered, especially now under Biden. And they did not inform the landowners that they were doing this legislation, and it was through the committee. I mean, it was already at that point ready to move forward with the feasibility study. The feasibility study told us that. We read it, and it says they invited all the tribes. There were 39 tribes. How many? 31. 31 tribes. There are 39 federally recognized, but 31 tribes were there, invited, and they knew about it. But I personally asked several landowners in Enid and in Duncan, that have land on the trail. They identified on our maps, there's my land right there. I'm right on the trail. Did you know about this legislation? No. Were you notified? No. Okay, so this is an example. It's not the only way, just one way that this can happen. So I think I probably should, I'll go to Tom Cole in a minute. He authored the first bill. I was in Governor Keating's office as education advisor back in the 90s. I ran for state superintendent statewide, got 49.5% of the vote. He appointed me Secretary of Ed. We went through a lot of political battles. I was in the governor's office with Tom Cole because he was the first appointed secretary for Secretary of State under Keating. I was the second. He was at the press conference when Keating, named me to the press and so on and so forth. So I know Tom Cole. I can get along with him. He's one of the nicest, polite, personality people that you can imagine. And he's very smart, and he knows how to walk it slow. Stop it, back it up, turn around, deny culpability. I'm just telling you, that's the way it works. So his name's not on the bill now, but he funds a whole lot of the people through K Street, the big funding mechanism in Washington, D.C., that is behind a whole lot of the people that keep voting the wrong way, okay? And I'm bringing him up because we now have, when Margaret came, as we were told earlier, Senator Hamilton brought up that Margaret Byfield spoke at the interim study for Senator Casey Murdoch, State Senator Casey Murdoch. That was on Tuesday, this week, actually. Casey Murdoch had Margaret, and then he had Trent Luce. And Margaret had just now, this stuff is evolving as we're going out and speaking, as she's going out and speaking. These situations change and some things become more urgent. So she brought forth the understanding of what's going on now with a very urgent issue. And Harriet Hagman has filed in Congress an amendment to stop the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, from approving companies to be set up to manage natural assets. What are national assets? Land, water, air even. Air quality because of environmentalism. That's what it is. And again, I have to go back in my mind to this little simple thing. Sometimes a chart helps you. I put this in May. I've got land property resources as one of the areas that gets controlled, people, and education. And, if you can control people's minds, you can control all of this. You can control people through food, through land, through everything, and it's being managed through technology, technocracy. So the Biden administration with 30 by 30 and everything else is using a lot of technology, these hubs that were set up, the climate hubs. What kind of reporting are we getting? We're seeing in Tulsa, there is a technology hub that was approved by the federal government just last week, and they're eligible for $75 million, ran by a black nonprofit organization in North Tulsa, developing drones that will monitor agriculture and monitor gas lines. That's the way it's written. And that's a new thing. That just came out this week too. There's no way to even hardly keep up with it. But again, we're gonna bring it back down to what can we do? We do have solutions. We want people to call their congressman and say, you do not want these 2 trails put under the federal government. Okay, so the wording on that, let's get more specific on that. The wording in that federal legislation for the 2 trails says that they will be under the National Park Service trail system. Okay, if you go to the back of the handout, the new expansion handout, At the top, I've written about Secretary Deborah Haaland, Haaland. She is over the Department of Interior. She was appointed right up front by President Biden, and she was the Democrat state chairman in New Mexico. Then she was elected to Congress, and she's the first Native American woman elected to Congress. She, with Kamala Harris, had some radical legislation then, under Obama, I guess it would have been, and Trump. I don't even remember how long she was in there, but she's got a history, she's got a record, and she is clearly an activist. And she's one of those that's already overstepping those boundaries that she should stay within. As Blayne Arthur told us earlier, agencies outstepping their boundaries, she's doing it. So in spite of the fact she's already got millions and billions coming through to do these projects, she's also stepping outside of regulation to move money around where she wants it, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so we all know the election's important coming up, but this is who's there right now. Deborah Haaland, you can read more about her up there on that first paragraph. Then the second part is naming the bureaus under her. She's the head of Department of Interior, which is over Bureau of Indian Affairs, Bureau of Indian Education, Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Clean Energy, clean energy management, Bureau of, I can't see in here too well, I can't read that, Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enhancement, National Park Service. This is under Deborah Haaland, National Park Service. The Office of Surface Mining and Reclamation and Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. You know, talk about recreation areas being shut down. UNESCO, the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, which is what I was talking about when you heard me, Andrea, the UN. The UN has all of these sites all over that are supposed to be preserved already for cultural purposes and history. Those are being incorporated into national heritage areas and combined. So that's another way. The U.S. Geological Survey. If you go on the U.S. Geological Survey website, you will find that they have a satellite system with NASA, provided by NASA in conjunction, partnership with NASA, and they are building what Biden has said will be an atlas of all the land. An atlas of all the land. And honestly, it's pretty much there now. If you start looking at their pictures, it rotates, I believe, every 8 days. It goes around the world. And you can look on the map and you can enlarge it and see grassland, you can see crops. They can identify the crops by the color and the shape and different things they look at. And, where things are planted, how they're doing. All of those things can be seen. So Deborah Haaland is really a treacherous person to have in that position. And she's pushing through like $2 billion for one of the restoration projects. This is really where Biden's infrastructure money is going. I don't know if you've heard that aspect of it, but instead of bridges and roads and things that was going to improve our nation and our infrastructure of our nation, it's into this environmental agenda. And they're calling that restoration. We're restoring through this. The interim study was really good. I'm not going to try to explain the national assets companies because I'm still learning about them myself, but Margaret goes through with a PowerPoint presentation that she did just this week on Tuesday, and it really helped. And even some of our usually closed-minded to the issues we're talking about, people who were there, the chairman and co-chair of the committee, were really tuned in. You could tell from their responses and the way that went. So I've got on my Facebook page and on Western Oklahoma Patriots page on Facebook, a YouTube that has that interim study. If you get the American Stewards of Liberty newsletter, it's also in that last newsletter that came out. It's a link down at the bottom. It says Watch Oklahoma Interim Study. It's there as well. So, you know, I'm thankful for my husband who has helped us out with technology and knows how to download that stuff. Because really, when people say, go look at what this interim study was, are you kidding? I mean, it takes a long time to get in that website on the legislature, know where to go. Then they don't even label it in a way you know what it is because it's under a committee. You know, it's real hard to find. It's hard for me to find. I have to think every time how to get back to where I need to go. And you have to know when it was, where it was, and what the name of the committee was. And so anyway, I'm just saying that's on YouTube, and I'll try to get some more of these on YouTube that we've mentioned here today that State Representative Humphreys did. That guy is terrific. He doesn't talk only, he talks and he takes action. You know, he doesn't just stand there and bleed like they said, like Hamilton said. He doesn't just stand there and bleed. He takes action and he gets things done. And yeah, he sounds crazy to a lot of people, but as you can tell, he doesn't care. And that's what we've got to have, people that know the truth, speak the truth, and just keep telling the truth. So I applaud you, Andrea, and OISA, Independent Stock Growers, for continuing with tenacity to plow the hard ground and get the education out across the state. And I'm glad that we met, and, you know, and then I met Sandy as well, and all of you, you know, all that I know, and all of you that are here today. We're a small group, but, you know, the Bible does talk about a remnant of people. And yet, whatever the Lord's will is, will be done. And we need to just be a part on the right side of it. So, Sandy, do you want to come and give them some more? She's got lots of info, too.
My name's Mindy. My husband and I, Gary, both of our families homestead in Rocky County. That on? Yes, please. Okay, both of our families homesteaded in Roger Mills County. Private property is very important to us. As you know, it's a way of life. That's all we've ever known. It's our private property. Like John said, in 2020, I got a little frustrated. You know, farmers and ranchers just want to be left alone and do their job. They know how to do what they do. And in 2020, I got aggravated because Western Oklahoma wasn't educated enough to what was going on. Because I think in the world, you look at DC and you think, that's too big, I don't have a say in that. But if you go down to states' rights and into Oklahoma, we do have a right. And so when I got the Western Oklahoma Patriots started, I thought, I want people to understand they do have a voice. Education is the way to have a voice. You have to know what's going on around you. And so that's what my deal is with the conservation easements and what they're trying to do to take the land. If you look at that, well, Mindy hadn't got that out yet. So in, I think, August of 2022, they started the Inflation Reduction Act, and they released $20 billion for conservation programs. So I'm thinking about private property and all this stuff. So the other day I just looked up Karl Marx's definition. So I want to read it to you because I have a passion for private property. And this is why they're coming so hard at private property. The theory of communism, this is what Karl Marx said. This is a quotation by him. The theory of communism may be summed up in one sentence: abolish all private property. So that's a simple understanding of why they're coming after us. So one of the ways they do is through conservation easements. So in these meetings we've had in Elk City, we've had two, we want to educate the people out there about the trails bill and also about conservation easements, because most of the time what we're talking to is farmers and ranchers. That's who we relate to. That's why we want our message to be rural. We want them to understand what's happening. And I appreciate Bert in Elk City. He helped get that meeting going, and Andrea, we were all there, and I appreciate that so much. And God has kind of just, I don't know, opened the doors, and it's just kind of happened. Like, you know, it's nothing we planned. It just kind of happened, and we opened the doors and walked through it. So anyway, a conservation easement, I'm going to read you the definition. A conservation easement is no longer private property. It is now has a federal connection in perpetuity. So, you know, you don't hear the word perpetuity very much. So I thought, I'm going to look up to see what the dictionary says about perpetuity. This is what it says. The first one says, a bond or security with no fixed maturity rate. I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. So perpetuity is forever? Yes, it is forever. And the second definition was the stat or the quality of lasting forever. So these conservation easements, so you say CRP, you know, I deal with the FSA office, because the conservation office. So that's where all this funding is going to. They're sending a lot more money out, like Shad said, for conservation easements. So they're wanting these farmers to sign up. But what these farmers don't realize, even the people that run the offices in these little county governments, they don't understand the language has changed. If you'll look at the handout I have dated March 25th, 2023, it'll explain a lot. Margaret Byfield, like, you know, we refer to her a lot. She's very connected in D.C., has attorneys. They know things before they happen. So she's very good to rely on getting the information out. So that's kind of what we try to do is get the information out. So if you'll look, it says the Inflation Reduction Act was in last August, so that would have been in 22. $20 billion for conservation programs. That's not just me talking. The conservation programs have been around since 1985 and were created to help farmers and ranchers increase agriculture production and so on. Now they're wanting, for these conservation easements, that's how they're going to control part of the land is through conservation easements. And when you have a federal government connection, the landowners don't decide like they were talking about. That means the federal government has the last say. So in Roger Mills County, what worries me is we have 30,000 acres of national grasslands. We have a national monument. We have a lot of land owned by the U.S. government. So there's already a lot of federal connection in our county. So I just, you know, ranchers need to understand that it's not only like my grandpa and Gary's grandpa. It's not always now going out and working hard, daylight to dark. Now they have to be educated in what's going on to protect themselves because the federal government is trying to control your property. And like Linda said, they're going through, like what we've just learned in this last week, we wondered, well, what are they going to do? How are they going to do controlling this private property? If you will look at the other handout, that's explaining the natural asset companies. And this is like, you know, very recent. This is just in October. It explains, like, I don't know enough about it either, but that's what they're going to do. They're going to put all the land that is in federal government control into these asset companies, the way I understand it, and then they can trade on them, like these big companies like BlackRock and all that. So this will give you a start on what a national asset company is. So if you'll follow the American Stewards, they have live updates, you know, all the time. And so that, and also not only conservation easements, but these land trusts. So the Texas Land Trust, Legacy Land Trust. We have a guy in Roger Mills County that He's a lawyer from Texas, and he has his land in a trust. So we not only have that, we have thousands of acres in a land trust. When you have a land trust, these people don't tell you the truth. I'm sorry, but they don't. And NCBA supports this. I seen it on RFD TV in front of my own eyes. They had these Texas land trust people up there talking about how great putting your land into the land trust. Well, it may save you. It goes through the IRS. It saves you some taxes and stuff like that. But that's controlling future generations. That is forever. So you're controlling everything your kids do. So I wouldn't have wanted that for my mom and dad. So everybody needs to understand and do your own homework. If anything that I've said today resonates with you, I hope one thing does. We have to educate ourselves to take a stand and push back, because we do have a voice. So I appreciate you guys taking time to listen to me and understand Linda and I's works, that we're trying to make Oklahoma our, states' rights, that we do have a voice here in the state of Oklahoma. So.
We wanted to wrap up with an action plan because we've got certain action steps that need to be taken. We've got state legislation coming up. Casey Murdoch had the Senate study this week, as we talked about several times now, and he'll have legislation this year. He's got a handout there. We like to end our meeting, so we thought we'll just do the same pattern here, although you know more about it. That update on state legislation, you've got a handout about that. And that's about the bill that Casey had filed last year. It's in a committee. It could go forward, but we think we're going to get rewriting. And one thing that we learned from people in our audience when we go out there and they've got expertise. There's a man who's a surveyor with a survey company, and talking with him, we had already seen the need to have legislation that if you have a conservation agreement on your land, or you're going to buy land, you should be able to know that it's under a conservation agreement. Because like in Nebraska, they did a study and found that 40% of the land value is depleted if you have a conservation agreement. So people don't realize that, and you buy the land and you find out you can't use it just any way you want to.
Well, there's no law that requires a conservation easement to be filed anywhere. Right. So even after you buy the land, if you find out there's conservation easement on it, that comes with the land.
Yeah, you just bought it. So that's what we want. We want legislation that will require that to be a disclosure when land is bought and sold, because we have disclosures for other things. So Casey Murdoch was talking with us after the interim study with Margaret in the room as well. She's going to help fashion that legislation. And so we can have an amendment probably to law that already exists, which will be easier than getting a whole new law in place. So that looks real good. Now, I was going to read to you. Can you hold that? Sorry. Again, this is new, and I had meetings all day yesterday till 5 last night. I had a Zoom call that ended at 5, so that was from 8 to 5 yesterday. So I didn't have time to print this, but we have a call to action, which we've mentioned, for this SEC approval of companies to manage natural assets. As Sandy said, they will be traded on the stock exchange. They will become a source of more federal money, which is why a lot of people want it. What's driving all of this, besides ignorant thinking? Money. The love of money. But they get money behind it. People get bought out.
Power.
And power. Money and power. And to control other people's lives, that power, yes. We've got a man in Tulsa named George Kaiser, who is the second wealthiest man in the state of Oklahoma. He's worth $14 billion. He's second behind Harold Hamm, who is a good, businessman. $25 billion, Harold Hamm, oil and gas company. But George Kaiser said to the New York Times in 2016 that he wants people to change their mind about centralized government being a problem. If there was one thing he wanted changed, that would be it. And he called Tulsa his beta city. And literally, I could stand here all week and tell you things he's doing and has done, not just in Tulsa, but he's gotten into some state policy on certain areas. That was part of my meeting yesterday on early childhood education, which is a whole other story. But it's a nonprofit that he led that got this technology grant that I mentioned earlier to do monitoring of agriculture and oil and gas lines. And I'm looking at Michael Sawyer there and remembering our conversation earlier. Thank you, Michael, for bringing in the resolution from Logan County. We appreciate that so much.
I want to read the counties that we have for signed against a 30 by 30. We have Dewey County was the first. That was Andrea. She got that done right away. Yep. And so then from that meeting, Bert, we talked about it. We wanted a meeting in Elk City. So we got Roger Mills County, my county, Custer, Ouachita, Caddo, Cimarron, Rogers, Stevens, Grady, Beckham, Johnston, Garfield, Blayne, Grant, Harper, Garvin, and like she said, Logan. And there may be other counties that have signed. We don't have those resolutions. So, So if you know of some, please get them to us because we will send them on to Margaret, and she has a map that has all those in there.
And I want to say that Margaret did say to us privately, but I think I should tell this group that she can see Oklahoma leading this, you know, as an example for the nation because we've got to say, Senator, the interim study went well. So maybe he and JJ can get together or have two different aspects of the issue. I don't know. They'll know how to handle that best. Okay, I wanted to throw out another thing we need to focus on here as far as action solutions. This is from American Stewards of Liberty in their newsletter they sent out, which I mentioned earlier. At the bottom of that newsletter, it's got links, and Sandy gave you a handout on the National Assets Companies, NAC, the red coloring on it. That's a description of it. There's also the video of the interim study there, but in that newsletter that they sent out, they are calling to action. We've got a committee where that will go through for a vote first before it goes to the full House. And the chairman of that committee is Oklahoma Congressman Tom Cole.
That's called
It's the Rules
Committee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rules Committee. So we want everybody in here from Oklahoma to call Tom Cole's office and say we want him to support Harriet Hagman's amendment to stop the SEC from forming NAC, which is National Asset Companies.
I haven't even told Linda this.
Mm-hmm.
I called Tom Cole's office yesterday. She didn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah. And
so when you call, make sure you have all your information.
Right. Let me give you the number. The number is on here. Let's see. Hold on. Sorry.
That's right.
I wish I had a handout for it, but I didn't have time. Okay, let's see. Okay, here it is. Okay, it's amendment number 109 in the Rules Committee that they're going to be voting on. And we need to support that amendment to stop the SEC. Harriet Hagman wrote it, and you all know who she is, I'm sure.
And Senator Ricketts, he did too.
Okay, all right. So we've got some good folks working on the federal level, the state level, county level, and, all of us just need to help more people understand more. So, again, thank you, Andrea, and all of your board and everyone here. Thank you so much.
I just want to say this is not what I wanted to do, and I don't know why I know, but I know what I know. It's because the Lord put it in my heart, I guess, and in my head. And then I had a front row seat to see what was happening. Because until I got on the federal or on the National Cattlemen's Beef Board, I was just home doing Bible studies with the kids and doing 4-H and FFA, and I was just a mom. And then I got put on that board, and then I saw the bad guys infiltrate. And that was in 2010. And then I watched it grow. I got silenced. I got a cease and desist. I got kicked out of the ranch rodeo. Our ranch got kicked out of the ranch rodeo because I stood up and I wouldn't sit down and I wouldn't shut up. And so we're here, and it's not, and I didn't go search all these friends out, all these good friends. They've been placed, once I turned my back on the people I'd been going to, because I was hearing stuff that I knew wasn't right, and I was taking the information back to the people that were partnering with the bad guys. And one day I called Brad and I said, after one of the meetings here in the city, I said, I'm done. And I have a Bible study every single morning. I got home, had my morning Bible study, and I said, either take away what I know, Lord, or put me somewhere where I can do good. And that's what this has happened. And I met John Paul, I met Mindy first. It was after that. Mm-hmm. And Shad. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't searching for you guys. And so he's placed us together as a remnant. Or he's taken the scales off. And I'm not afraid to say that it's the Lord did it.
Yes, amen. And in Galatians 5, it says, do not grow weary in doing well and doing good. Don't grow weary. But I tell you what, if we get weary, we need to take a nap, take a week off, and come back at it, right?
I need a nap.
We all do. Thank you.